Yo, what's up guys, and welcome to a brand new video on my channel. So as you've probably seen by the title, today I'm finally gonna unveil how ALC Bleedover actually works, what it actually does to your Sens, and how you can take advantage of it and find your own ALC Bleedover. So to start, I'm gonna explain to you guys how ALC Bleedover actually works and what it actually does, because there's a lot of misconceptions in the community about ALC Bleedover and what it does, and everybody kind of has their own perception about it. So I'm gonna actually go over how ALC Bleedover actually affects your Sens based on my own researches and what I've came to realize myself. Alright, so first of all, I want to bust some myths about ALC Bleedover and some common misconceptions. So the first thing being, some people think that every time they start the game, for the ALC Bleedover to have an effect, they think they have to go into ALCs and move one slider like this and then close out of it again for it to have an effect. But this is actually not true, since when you're playing ALC Optics right here, your entire ALC section always has an effect on your normal Sens. And then another common misconception is that some people think that if you turn these to max and then you use this as an ALC Bleedover, you close out of this, they think their actual Sens is gonna be faster. But in reality, it's the exact same speed as if you have all of those on 0. It doesn't change the actual speed of your Sens. And I'm gonna get into this more deeply in a bit. So then, what does ALC Bleedover actually do? Let me explain. So if you do not use ALC Optics and you have those off and you play like for free, for example, this is a different thing. Then you actually have to come into the ALCs and change one slider like back and forth like this, close out of it to actually activate the ALC Bleedover. And you're gonna understand this better in a bit. So think of this as your enemy. So right about here is the aim assist bubble. So what many people do not understand is your ALC Bleedover only has an effect once your crosshair moves into that bubble. So basically, your ALC Optics, they put a multiplier on your optics. Optics. So let's say you play on a 1 Sens on your 1x scope in your regular Optics. That means you would be playing 4-1, which would be too slow, right? So we go into your ALC Optics and you put it to 3.0. And what that does is it basically puts a 3x multiplier onto that Sens. And that's how people play 4-1 linear, for example. They actually play 4-1 with a 3.0 multiplier, which equals to 4-3. And a similar thing happens with your general ALC settings. So once you move your crosshair into that area of the aim assist bubble, your ALCs kind of have a similar effect. They put a multiplier onto your Sens and they make it feel different once you are in the bubble. So I'm gonna show you an in-game example of this. So right here is the aim assist bubble. And basically, your Sens does not get affected by your ALCs at all, like when turning or when looking anywhere, until you aim at a target. And that's where the magic begins. Basically, your ALCs change how your aim feels once you are in that bubble. So let's say at the moment I'm on all 0 ALC Bleedover. So let's say you put 30 response curve on this, right? So what that does is the 30 response curve actually acts like a multiplier. So it doesn't just give you 30 response curve once you are on target. Otherwise, I would be barely able to move my crosshair right here. What it does, it kind of acts as a multiplier, and it makes your aim feel more like 30 response curve once you are on target than if you would have this on 0. So basically, the 30 response curve, it doesn't actually put on a 30 response curve. It basically comes as a package with these paroptics right here. So, for example, the 3.0 on 1x, it basically is a 3.0 with the 30 response curve, but only as a multiplier, so it doesn't actually make it 30 response curve. I know it's pretty weird and it's pretty hard to understand, but it basically combines your ALC Sens with your paroptics, and that's also why you have to activate it if you do not use these paroptics. Because if you do not use these paroptics, what happens is it basically applies your ALCs just to whatever you have right here. So what you can do is you can try this for yourself. For example, you put all of this on max and also the ADS speed, and then you're gonna look around and you're gonna realize that you are playing on the same Sens. It does not make it faster. It does not make it more reactive or harder to control. It's literally the exact same Sens. But then, once you are on target and inside of this aim assist bubble, what it does, it actually makes it feel twitchier and faster, since now I put all of those on max. And once again, it acts like a multiplier, and it comes as a package with those paroptics right here. So what it does is it makes it feel more reactive and more twitchy, because I just put it all on max. And you can try this for yourself. It's actually not that easy to notice because it doesn't have a huge effect. It has a slight effect and it makes it feel a little different, but if you really pay attention, you're gonna notice, and this can actually give you an advantage if you use the right ALC Bleedover. And also, the same goes for hip firing. So, if I put my yaw speed and pitch speed and the extra yaw and extra pitch on max, and then I start hip firing my target, you're gonna feel the same difference. It's gonna feel faster and twitchier once you are on target, and then once you go away, it's just your regular Sens. So now you may ask, why do the ALCs only affect your aim once you are in the ALC bubble or once you are on target? And the reason for that is, once again, Apex's coding. So basically, these paroptics right here, they go over to your normal paroptics, right? They put a multiplier on them. And since the game knows that you have your ALCs turned off, it wants to deactivate them. But since you have your ALC paroptics on, the coding thinks that you're playing on ALCs. So what happens is, you turn it off, the game knows you're on 4-1, so it doesn't change your actual Sens. But since you are using ALC paroptics, or if you just activated your ALCs, the game thinks you are playing on ALCs. So what it does is it applies the ALC's effect to your ALC paroptics. And since those have an effect on your normal paroptics, it ends up happening that it makes a difference when you are aiming on a target with those ALC paroptics. And I know this may seem hard to understand. Alright, so let's do a rundown real quick, so you can actually understand this. So, these are your normal paroptics, and if you would have no ALCs on, paroptics off, ALCs off, as you can see, my Sens is extremely slow since I play 4-1. So then what I do is I turn on my paroptics, right? I turn off ALCs, and then my ALC paroptics multiply my Sens by 3, because I have my 1x on 3, for example. So it's actually a normal speed again, right? So the same thing happens with your ALCs, but they do not affect this sense right here. They affect your per optics, because this is one and the same tab. This is the ALC tab, and your ALCs always have an effect on your ALC per optics, and that's just because of Apex's coding. So basically, whatever you do in here does not change your actual look around sense. So it doesn't actually change anything right here, but it changes your sense once you are on target. And I really hope you understand that. It's kind of hard to explain. But what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna show you what are some good ALC bleedovers and how you can actually use it to your advantage. Alright, so what are the actual ALCs you should be using as a bleedover? I'm gonna give you a few examples of some good ALC bleedovers, and you can just go and try them for yourself. And just keep in mind that when you look around, nothing changes, but as soon as you're on target, your sense is gonna feel slightly different with each of these bleedovers. So first off, I'm gonna start with my own bleedover, which is all 0. And this is actually really common. You're gonna see that from a lot of players these days. And the reason for that is it basically makes it feel heavier and a little slower once you are on target, which basically just makes it feel more secure, less twitchy. Like you have more wiggle room on doing something wrong because your aim is like, it's slower, it has more slowdown, and it feels heavier. So it basically also helps you with your recoil control from afar, because your aim is not all over the place. Once you actually lock onto a target, it's gonna feel slower and heavier, so it can make you feel more secure and it can make it feel more controllable. So another thing about my ALC bleedover is, why do I have target compensation off? I get this question a lot, and the reason for that is, if I have target compensation off, I do not actually lose my aim assist. I still have normal aim assist, as you can see, because you actually turn off your ALCs, so it ignores this right here, and it just takes the aim assist off your regular settings. And that's actually the reason why I'm turning it off. So since I turn this off right here, it just goes and takes the aim assist of the normal values right here. But if I have my aim assist on right here, what can happen sometimes is, since the ALC section as a whole has an effect on your sense, sometimes it can overwrite your normal aim assist, and it can make it feel a little weird sometimes, but this is pretty much personal preference. Me personally, I've noticed that I'm more consistent and I get less like weird aim assist bugs. For example, when I like lock onto a target and then it makes it feel like I cannot get away again or something like that. Like that doesn't really happen if I have this ALC aim assist turned off. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that the game actually takes the aim assist of my normal sense. So another common ALC bleedover you're gonna see, especially in the pro scene, is this one right here. This is basically Jen Burton's Sens, but used as an ALC bleedover. So basically he has, of course, target compensation on, ADS on 130, yawn pitch on 400, and everything else on 0. And what this does, it makes it feel a little faster than having it all on 0, and it makes it feel a little bit more free, like you can move more freely. So basically you're more in control yourself, and this is all a personal preference thing. So if you like the steady, like locked in, slow feeling of all 0, then go for that. But if you're more of somebody that likes to have a lot of control in their own hands and likes to do all the aiming more by themselves, I suggest you trying this one. But as I said, it doesn't make a huge difference. I said in the beginning, it only makes a slight difference. So it's really just tweaking it to your own liking. And you can basically try everything in here and just see what fits you best. Alright, And another common ALC bleedover, also in the pro scene very common, is just using default ALCs. What this does, it kind of is like a middle point between having like high ALCs and all on 0. Basically, this makes it feel very default like your normal Sens right here basically has all of this implemented into it. For example, the ramp up time, the ramp up delay, all of that is implemented in your regular settings. So it doesn't really overwrite anything besides making your hipfire speed a little bit slower, since your hipfire speed being on 4 would be something like 220, 180, something like that. So it kind of just makes your hipfire speed a little bit slower, and it turns up your response curve a little bit. So what this does is it kind of gives you like a middle point between, like, for example, the Jen Burton Sens and the all 0 ALC Bleedover. And this is kind of a good middle point and a good way to start finding your own ALC Bleedover. And what I can say is I used default for a long time, and it makes it feel really controllable while still being able to do a lot of the aiming by yourself and move freely. So I totally recommend the default ALC Bleedover as well. Alright, so the last thing I wanted to explain is what do these top 3 settings do to your ALC Bleedover. So we already covered the response curve, which basically changes your response curve once you are on target. And just as a multiplier, so it doesn't actually make it 30 response curve, but it definitely does slow it down a little bit. And by the way, having 30 response curve on your ALC Bleedover is actually pretty goated, so you can try that for yourself. So yeah, and then these top 2 settings are kind of weird. So basically, your dead zone does not have an effect at all, because the game actually realizes that you are on no look dead zone. So basically, whatever you do, it still ignores the dead zone value in here. As you can see, if I turn this to 50%, it doesn't actually change anything. It makes it feel totally normal, doesn't change anything. You can shoot just fine. So yeah, basically it ignores this dead zone value right here. It only takes the response curve and the outer threshold, which I'm about to explain to you guys. Basically, maybe you've tried ALCs before, so let's leave this on real quick just to show you guys. So right now I'm on default ALC, so as you can see it's pretty slow, pretty steady. And if you turn this outer threshold all the way up, it makes it feel more twitchy and more responsive, because what this does is this right here, this orange ring right here, is your outer threshold. And what this means is once you hit this ring, you're on max sensitivity. So once you hit this ring, you are at 160 yaw speed. So if you turn this all the way to 0, it takes you all the way from the middle to all the way out here to reach this 160 speed. So basically the outer threshold kind of makes your Sens faster or slower. And this is the exact same thing for ALC Bleedover. If you want to try 30% outer threshold and then turn off your ALCs, it also just makes it slightly more twitchy. It also makes it slightly easier to react and have good tracking. So yeah, I suggest you trying actually these 2 settings on both 30. It's actually pretty good. I used to play around with this a little bit. At the moment, I'm just sticking with my all 0 ALC Bleedover. But as I said, you can play around with all of these settings. I wouldn't really personally play around with the ramp up and ramp up delay. I would only leave this if you are actually using the default ALC Bleedover. But if you're trying anything by yourself, I would suggest you just putting these to 0 and then going from there. And just remember the dead zone gets ignored. The aim assist, if it's on, it can cause some trouble. It doesn't always. It makes it feel a little different. Me personally, I use aim assist off. So it just takes the regular aim assist from these settings right here. And that's basically all you need to know to start tweaking this by yourself. So I gave you the starting points. You can try the Jen Burton ALC I showed you. You can try the all zero. You can try the default. You can try doing something with these two. And that's basically all you can do. And just remember, it does not make a huge difference. It's only a slight difference. It kind of acts as a package with your peroptics right here. So it doesn't actually change your sense. It only changes the feeling once you are on target. So just keep this in mind, and then you can start playing around with it by yourself. So that was basically it with today's video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I'm gonna try to read them and answer them. And if you are curious about my own settings, I'm gonna link the video on the top right. And yeah, guys, I hope you have a good day and a good week, and peace out. Oh, and also make sure to like and subscribe.